Hello, my name is Dr. Susan Jenkins, and I'm excited to work on this training with you today. The training is jointly developed and provided by Evidence Oracle and the Open University of Tanzania's Voluntary Organization for Professional Monitoring and Evaluation. Evidence Oracle is a consortium of experienced evaluation and data science professionals who provide support to organizations and government agencies in building sound evidence for organizational success. We offer trainings, logic model performance management, and strategic planning support, and a range of other related services. The Open University of Tanzania's Voluntary Network for Professional Monitoring and Evaluation is a collaborative professional network dedicated to uniting individuals engaged in monitoring and evaluation. OutVoteMe enhances the monitoring and evaluation profession by fostering collaboration, facilitating knowledge sharing, and advocating for the critical role of M&E, monitoring and evaluation, in policy and decision-making processes. My name, as I said, is Dr. Susan Jenkins, and I will be your trainer for this session. In addition to being a senior director and founder of Evidence Oracle, I'm a senior fellow with the Data Foundation, a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. The Data Foundation is a trusted authority on the use of open, accessible data to fuel more efficient, effective, and accountable government, sparks innovation, and provides insights into the country's most pressing challenges. We conduct research, facilitate collaborative thought leadership, and promote advocacy programs that advance practical policies for the creation and use of accessible, trustworthy data and evidence. I am also faculty at the American University in Washington, D.C., teaching courses on program evaluation and monitoring. Today, I will share with you my 30 years of program evaluation, data science, and performance management experience, which has been shaped through work with public, private, profit, and nonprofit organizations in the United States and with international organizations as well. I will also draw on my years as the Chief Evaluation Officer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So with that, let's get started. Training is the second in a three-part series. This training, measuring the effects of changes in organizations, will help you to recognize the outcomes commonly associated with organizational change initiatives, develop Z models to map change processes and outcomes, and identify and measure system-level change using appropriate indicators and methods. The first training in this series was called Planning for Evaluating a Program, Policy, or Project, Designing Evaluations that Deliver Real Insights, and that gave you the tools to plan evaluations that are purposeful, efficient, and aligned with broader goals. The third training, Learn to Draw and Use Logic Models with Confidence, will teach you how to define and explain logic models, build logic models using a step-by-step process, and use them to engage interest holders and to measure outcomes of policies, projects, and programs. For now, let's jump into today's topic, measuring the effects of organizational change. Today, we're going to talk about how to measure changes in organizations such as a government office, healthcare center, hospital, a school. In many ways, this is similar to the evaluation of a program designed to improve the quality of life of a person, but rather than changes in an individual, we're looking for changes in an institution, where you can ask a person if they feel empowered and test their knowledge and skills. You cannot do that with an organization, but there are ways to measure whether an organization is changing in the ways that we want it to. Since systems and systems change can be difficult to define and operationalize, measuring systems change may seem daunting. However, understanding and considering some basic features of systems will allow you, as evaluators, to operationalize systems change and measure changes in incremental steps. So you should, at the end of this training, understand common outcomes for organizational change initiatives, understand how to apply the value cycle or Z model frameworks, and identify and measure system-level change effectively. We're going to start with recognizing outcomes commonly associated with organizational change initiatives. So, as in the first training, we're going to focus on the Tanzanian Development Vision 2050 and build examples for each topic that we discuss relying on this vision. I'll talk about ways to build evidence-driven strategies that promote adaptability and enable informed decision-making, and also ways to think about the key performance indicators that need to be in place to then evaluate organizational change. But before we go too far, I want to focus on our working example a little bit more. So we're going to focus on goal number 5, an inclusive, transparent, and accountable government system that ensures lasting peace, guarantees the freedom and security of citizens. As we dig more deeply into the Tanzanian development vision, we should keep in mind possible measures related to good governance, defined as having effective leadership, promoting sustainability and equity, transparency in financial operations, and programs that deliver high quality services that meet community needs. And so looking at the vision foundation, I highlighted these as areas that we could focus our organizational evaluation on. And continuing to look at this and digging even more deeply, we can look at the digital transformation section of the Tanzania Vision for 2050. All of the things that a government can focus on, we can't measure everything. So for the sake of our conversation today, we will focus on digital transformation. In addition to this supporting the good governance goal of delivering good public services, there are additional organizational level goals related to nationwide access to communication and internet services and socioeconomic development. And so you see the highlights here. For the rest of the session, I'll refer to this government entity as a Tanzanian digital agency, and that is what we'll focus our evaluation on. And measuring, is the Tanzanian digital agency improving service delivery, ensuring nationwide access, and promoting socioeconomic development? So as we think about what are the differences between an organizational level evaluation and an individual level evaluation, let's look at 3 different outcomes. So the outcomes are on the left-hand side, good public services. At an organizational level, we may want to measure the service quality and the service availability of those services being provided by the organization. At the individual level, we would measure the level of service use by individuals and their satisfaction with the service. Moving on to the outcome of access to communication and internet services, at the organization level, we may measure service reach, how many people have access to this service, what geographies have access, and the accessibility in terms of the cost and the availability of hardware. At the individual level, we might measure the knowledge and awareness of the services, as well as their level of service usage. And then for the third outcome, socioeconomic development, at the organizational level, we would measure things related to the creation of economic opportunities. At the individual level, we may measure increased income as a measure of socioeconomic development. And so you see, with the same outcome, looking at the organizational level and the impact of an organization, we're measuring slightly different things than we are when we look at the effect of that program and those services on individuals. Some key concepts when we think about organizational change is the unit of focus. So basically, we start by treating an organization as a program, policy, or project, but the unit of focus is, in this case, the Tanzanian Digital Agency as a whole. We'll look at changes in how it operates and what it does. The things we will look at are the policies or basic principles guiding its action, working to meet the goals of good public digital services that are accessible and reliable and promote socioeconomic development. We will also look at the processes or how business is carried out, and this might be application processes for people that want the service, methods for addressing complaints, and fees associated with the services. We'll look at agency relationships that may include public-private partnerships, relationships between national and regional governments, relationships with schools and universities that are expected to train digital staff. And we'll also look at power structures that may reflect decisions, and are those decisions made from the top down or from the community up? Are needed partners part of the process? Do the right partners have the power to make relevant decisions in their scope of influence? And do regional governments make regional decisions, Or does the national government make all of the decisions? I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong, but we would measure these types of things. We would also measure what are the organizational norms and values. Is customer service valued? Is innovation a norm? So measuring these areas can help us to understand if the pathways through which information flows are working and if the organizational structures are helping or creating barriers for successful digitalization. Continuing with definitions, what is organizational change? Frequently, when we evaluate an organization, it's because there's been some change or some changes planned for the near future. So we have to look at changes to how an organization functions, how it provides services, and its efficiency of processes, and look at those in bite-sized pieces. If we're looking at evaluating the functioning of a major component, such as funding streams for digital transformation, we have to understand where the funding for the Tanzanian Digital Agency comes from, where it goes, and how it's awarded to regions or industry partners. We also need to know the stated purpose of the awards and link those things to the overall goals of digital transformation that we have defined as good public service, access to communication and internet, and socioeconomic development. An evaluation question for this type of a focus might be, how does this or that policy that guides digital transformation affect one or more of these goals? Does this policy improve the quality or availability of services, for example? If we're looking at organizational change management, we might focus on collecting baseline information about the functioning of the Tanzanian Digital Agency, for example, related to making internet services accessible to Tanzanians. Are there enough staff with the right training and experience? Does the infrastructure exist and is it in working order? These are examples. We would document the process of change in hiring or infrastructure upkeep and track how it's going and the follow through in these activities. Ultimately, we would answer an evaluation question about the effect of the Tanzanian Digital Agency on internet availability. And has the agency improved the pathways through which information flows and service is provided? Thinking about the measurement concept, another key concept is whether the organizational effort is adaptive or in small increments or small tweaks to existing operations versus transformational, where there may be major restructuring, replacing existing procedures, a major infrastructure replacement, such as moving from wired internet to virtual internet. Some examples of adaptive changes include adding new payment options for customers to complete an order online or implementing new intake forms for clients or vendors. Some examples of transformational change include converting an existing brick and mortar business into an e-commerce or omni-channel business, or redesigning a company's website and rebuilding it from scratch, retiring an existing product to divert funds and resources to development of a new product. So we need to think about, are the changes that we'll be measuring incremental or transformational, because that will affect the evaluation questions that we ask, the data that we collect, and the analyses and recommendations that we develop. So we think about measurement focus, where to start your evaluation journey. The same way that when you plan an evaluation of a direct service program, you need to understand how the organization, the Tanzanian Digital Agency in this example, operates. What are its strengths and weaknesses, and how well it's meeting its mission? For conceptualization, distill the organization's complex issues into a complete and clear picture of its root causes and potential solutions. Here, gather perspectives from different interest holders and learn what is known and unknown about the functioning of the Tanzanian Digital Agency. Agenda. Craft a plan based on the issues identified and perspectives gathered that establishes the direction the organization could take and how you're going to measure whether it's getting there. Look at the nexus, identifying features within each component of the organization's architecture, and that can be virtual architecture as well as physical architecture that will drive the intended changes. Looking at guidance and governance, identify who is implementing the change within the organization and what they're doing, and engage and execute. Encourage others to participate in documenting the change implementation. As I've said in other of the trainings, evaluation is a team and collaborative effort. Other organizational change considerations: degree of difficulty and nature of the upgrade. Within these categories, you can measure how big an initiative the organization is implementing. For our example, is the Tanzanian Digital Agency Transformation Initiative adaptive or transformational? Adaptive changes are small and incremental, and transformational changes have much larger impact and typically occur dramatically and suddenly. So, how you measure and evaluate may not vary much based on the size of the change, but what you measure will. Small changes create small improvements in efficiency, whereas big changes would be expected to show large changes in efficiency. Common barriers to measuring organizational change are listed here: a lack of clear vision, poor employee buy-in, and an inadequate understanding among managers of the change and the purpose of the change. So, like with any evaluation, make sure that there are clear and measurable organizational goals and objectives, specific activities that the organization is conducting that expects to help it meet those goals and objectives, and define targets. How will you know when the organization has been successful in the change it is trying to implement? For the Tanzanian Digital Agency's Digital Transformation Initiative, the goal that we have is to foster innovation through providing nationwide access to reliable internet. One objective may be, for the sake of argument here and our example, that 90% of homes are internet ready by 2040. Specific activities might be to implement policies requiring all new homes to meet internet ready standards and to train 100 building contractors per year on how to bring older homes up to standard for internet access. If these things are in place, the vision is clear and it will be easier to evaluate progress towards this aspect of Tanzania's digital transformation. You can survey and interview staff both about their motivation for change and their active participation in this change. And if employees or building contractors in this example do not support the digital transformation goal or the approach that the Tanzanian Digital Agency is taking, they can undermine it. And it will be important to understand their issues and address them early on. I've seen examples of staff not buying into a leadership goal, making up data, redefining the outcome to look better than it actually is. And even if the goal looks like it's being met through the data, it may not actually be being met. And so, for example, training building contractors to bring older homes up to standard, is this going to be paid for by the Tanzanian Digital Agency, or is this going to be an unfunded mandate that could affect the buy-in of those contractors and then ultimately the success of this organizational change? The next step is developing a model to map the change processes and outcomes, and this will help us to formulate and structure our evaluation. So now that we have some fundamentals about how evaluating an organization is similar to, but different from, evaluating a program, we also have some idea of the things to focus the evaluation on and different ways of thinking of the interest holders, especially the Tanzanian Digital Agency employees and managers. One model that I've seen used and applied myself is the value cycle model. In this model, you measure organizational progress. I worked with a team trying to bring together organizations in a geographic region to better support people with disabilities and their families. And in that case, the immediate value referred to activities that facilitated policy and practice changes in later cycles and contributed to improved supports and individual outcomes. The early conversations, brainstorming, and planning for an organizational change. The value that this example was bringing together the right organizations and having them meet and brainstorm about how they might work together. So building that basic collaboration amongst those organizations was the value of the first cycle of the value cycle. The potential value comes next once an organization starts to communicate about the problem to be solved and the solution it will implement, as well as initial product development, advancement of current initiatives, and changes in thinking or knowledge that are expected to produce value in later cycles. The value here came from specific memoranda of understanding and new terms of reference between the organizations on how they would work together more effectively and efficiently. The applied value cycle. The applied value comes from the ways that knowledge leads to changes in practice, such as innovation, new approaches, or changes in policies, programs, or service. The value here was improvements in assessing clients' needs and how referrals were made between organizations that were serving the same people. So now we're starting to see changes in practice. The performance improvement or realized value. In realized value, the value here was the result of the changes to the assessment and the referral processes from cycle 3. So those changes in information and pathways created more effective pathways in terms of processes and relationships to more efficiently work among the organizations that then resulted in more efficient service for the people with disabilities. So in applied value cycle 3, we had changes in practice, and in realized value cycle 4, people were living better lives, they had better quality of life, and they were getting their services that they needed more efficiently and effectively. And then finally, cycle 5 is reframing value and redefining success. So thinking about new strategies for measuring outcomes and program sustainability. Additionally, this cycle refers to changing goals, strategies, or system operations as a result in changes in knowledge capital and practice in earlier cycles. It involved institutionalizing the success of the new processes and policies and coming from now having a new vision of how to measure the results of service to people with disabilities and having broader goals for the quality of life of people with disabilities. So now that the organizations are operating in a better way and providing better services, again, in a better way, we start to reframe the value. What are the next set of improvements that could be possible? This slideshow has a value cycle model can be used to structure an evaluation of our Tanzanian digital transformation initiative. In the first cycle, the value is better understanding among the government leaders and policymakers, the business community and individuals of the value of digital transformation and the creation of new public-private partnerships. So even if nothing else were to happen, we still have some value created. The evaluation could survey or interview leaders about the awareness of the importance of digital transformation. The second cycle builds on the relationships and awareness generated in the first cycle, and we see additional value of government and private business managers having increased knowledge and skills to use increased digital assets for communication and to potentially improve business opportunities and staff capacity. There could be knowledge and skills tests as part of an evaluation related to this cycle. The third cycle is based on staff and organizations putting those skills to use and changing the processes and how their work is done. Measures of supports for automation and new policies and procedures that support automation would be the focus of an evaluation here. The changes in operations from the third cycle of improving organizational efficiency among the public and private partners allows for things like more hiring, more service delivery, which is the desired outcome. Measures of efficiency and service costs and time spent could be measured here. And in the fifth cycle, redefining success, institutionalizing the changes and a digital innovation mindset. Measures of reframing value may involve interviews and focus groups to understand the extent to which digital transformation has become a core value of the Tanzanian Digital Agency. And that's how we can apply the value cycle model to our particular example. And I've highlighted what are some of the things that could be measured and what are some of the methods for measuring those things. And that really would be the framework and the structure for your organizational evaluation. Another model that you may want to use is the Z model. And it identifies and tracks the levels of changes that lead to the ultimate strategic outcomes, though it's incremental piece by piece. You have resources that result in activities, and then you have outputs. Those outputs become the resources for the next level. and then you have more outputs. And then the third row, you have those outputs becoming resources, which ultimately lead to the strategic program results. And so you can have 3 rows, you can have 5 rows, you can have as many rows as you need, but the more rows you have, the more complicated things are. So it might be better to break things down into bite-sized chunks and have smaller strategic program results that you're looking for that take maybe 3 to 5 rows in your logic model. A through C in this case, but it may be A through E in a 5-row process. And so you can look at, in this case, incentives, potential benefits for taking part in a particular action, constraints, the reduction of constraints, rules or limits that prevent a particular action, and the creation of opportunities, conditions that enable a particular action. And so applying this to the Tanzanian Digital Agency Digital Transformation Initiative, we might have a Z model that looks something like this. And you can evaluate the success of the incentive program by the level of awareness of builders around the new digital transformation push. So you have incentives for home builders that results in an activity of awarding those incentives, and the output is more builders support the internet expansion project. Those more supportive builders are in the second row, supportive builders. Then you have training for those builders. So they're more supportive, now they're trained, so they're more skilled. Those skilled builders in the bottom row then build new and retrofit existing homes for the internet. And then that can lead you to 90% of homes having reliable internet, which was our original target, and nationwide access to reliable internet. So this is another way of measuring our movement to the digital transformation that we've been looking for. Once we have a basic model to structure our evaluation, be it the value cycle model, be it the Z model, or another model that you may choose, it's time to identify and measure system-level changes using appropriate indicators and methods. First, you have to identify the purpose. If we're looking at organizational efficiency, we would look at the scale of the operations. Are we providing internet to all communities? Are we modernizing all communities simultaneously and equitably? Could be some evaluation questions. The quality of the service could be a focus. Is the new digital infrastructure installed correctly? Are staff well trained? Or is the organization responsive to different situations, such as a mix of new construction and retrofitting existing construction, meeting the needs of community with a lot of demand, like businesses or large apartment buildings and schools, as compared to communities with lower usage needs, maybe rural communities where it's mostly people living there, as opposed to large businesses with large internet needs. And so identifying the purpose of the evaluation can help us to focus it, because as I've said before, one evaluation cannot measure all aspects of everything. You have to focus it to make it effective. And so organizational change in measuring capacity, here are some common questions. And for example, since the start of the Digital Transformation Initiative, has the accessibility of internet services improved? And so I've highlighted that. That looks at increased scale. If that's the focus for our evaluation, this may be the question that we want to ask as our evaluation question. Capacity can also be measured by improved quality. And for our project, a common question or a useful question could be, are more providers within the system systematically adhering to program quality standards? Are builders that received incentives and training more likely to have construction projects that pass inspection, for example? And measuring capacity number 3, improved responsiveness. Here are some common questions for our purposes. Is there sufficient supply of program and services tailored to the different needs of clients? Our evaluation question could be, are there differences in the time and quality of internet service provision based on community type? These would be good evaluation questions for what we're developing for the Digital Transformation Initiative. Organizational change. Another focus could be identifying purpose. And so connections or relationships of pathways. And if you're more focused on improving relationships and processes rather than capacity to provide service, you would think about linkages. Are service providers connected so that if someone moves, they can easily transfer their internet service, for example? Is there alignment across initiatives so that, for example, regardless of where a builder received their internet certification, they're equally well skilled? And the third area under purpose, cross-system coordination. Is there cross-system coordination so that, for example, the education department that trains people are teaching what the businesses that hire people with internet skills need in their staff in order to improve economic development? Or is the speed and capacity of the internet services what the businesses need to function, and are staff that approve business licenses aware of the internet capacity in an area and do not over-approve businesses when the capacity is not yet there? So cross-system coordination can help us to avoid problems in these areas. So we'd want to measure that as part of our evaluation. Common measures or evaluation questions for measuring connection. Looking at improved linkage for our case, are there fewer clients falling through the cracks? An evaluation question for us could be specifically, are there any communities or population groups that are not benefiting from the digital transformation? Measuring connection, we could look at improving alignment. Here are two common types of questions, and our specific evaluation question might be, are all training providers staying up to date about digital innovations and sharing information about challenges and solutions? And in our third area, improve cross-system coordination, here are three sample questions. And for our evaluation, we may want to ask, is communication between public and private partners effective? Effective meaning that the information that is needed is being shared and that each partner is able to fulfill their role in the transformation project. And we can also look at overarching questions for improved or institutional structures. And here are three common types of questions that we could adapt. And for our purpose, we may want to ask, is the Tanzanian Digital Agency keeping up to date about internet service standards and creating new incentive programs as needed? And that would be an overarching question for the evaluation if this is the focus of our evaluation. Organizational tool documentation. Here's a tool that you can use to document the changes in these different areas: scale, quality, and comprehensiveness in the first area, linkages, alignment, and cross-system coordination in the second area. And you can use this form to track your changes and your description of the challenges that you're addressing. Now let's think about the evaluation types. Developmental evaluation can be effective for complex or dynamic environments such as systems. So this really may be the one that you focus on the most out of the different evaluation types. It's intended to support innovation within a context of uncertainty, and it's useful for these dynamic situations where program stakeholders expect to keep developing and adapting the program. It never is intended to conduct a final outcome evaluation of a standardized model because the model keeps changing as needs keep changing. So in that case, developmental evaluation may be the best one. As developmental evaluation also supports ongoing real-time decisions about what to change, expand, or close out for further development. This is a live initiative, and so it needs to be measured as it changes over time. As we think about a model to help you determine if developmental evaluation is right for you, you can look at this and work through it. But if you're looking at an organization rather than a specific program within an organization, developmental evaluation may be best because organizations are constantly changing and there is always a feature of what it is. And so this may be your best option. But this can help you to work through what is your evaluation type going to be. And so with that, I want to thank you for your participation in this training, and I hope to see you in the other trainings in this series. And you can always reach me, Dr. Susan Jenkins, at evidenceoracle@outlook.com. Thank you.